Hey everyone, and welcome to another tutorial by artincontext.org, where we explore various art-related topics. My name is Matt, and in today's tutorial we will be covering the topic of anime eyes. Within the genre of anime, there are many ways to convey different types of emotions, different expressions in the face, and the eyes are often utilized as the main tool in order to do so. So in this tutorial, what we'll do is we'll break down the process of how to draw different types of eyes that kind of work to convey different types of emotions. Now we're going to slowly transition into a new eye, and this is where we're going to draw a more narrowed eye, a more squinted eye, an eye that is kind of more associated with a character that is angry or brooding or sinister. And what we're going to do is we're going to start the process with some grid lines, the same way as we did for the neutral eyes. So using your pencil and your ruler, what you want to establish is 3 horizontal lines. However, this time we're going to make these lines a little bit more closer together, but we do want to make sure that they are evenly spaced. Once we have those 3 horizontal lines drawn, we can then establish a vertical line that goes directly through the middle of those 3 lines, and then we can draw another 2 vertical lines on either side of that first vertical line, again making sure that they are evenly spaced. Now we're going to start with a parallelogram styled shape, but a really narrow parallelogram shape, and this is basically going to create this really narrowed eye aesthetic. So what we want to do is we want to work within those grid lines, making a 4-sided shape that completely mirrors or is completely symmetrical to one another on either side of the grid lines. So we're going to follow a similar process as we have before, except this time we're going to kind of consider how this narrowed eye effect or shape obviously changes the features slightly in the eye itself. What we'll also do is we'll also switch up the features a little bit to create a little bit more of a sinistery quality within the eye. Now once we have drawn in this parallelogram shape, again we're going to follow the same process of adding subtle curvature to the corners of the parallelogram shapes. What we can also do, similar to the previous eye drawing, is we're going to create these bolden lines, or add in these bolden lines along the upper eyelid to suggest the top eyelashes in the character itself. Now what we can also do is we can kind of actually elongate the top eyelashes with these bolden lines that kind of come to a sharp point near the outer corners of the eyes, and this again is going to give a more narrowing effect to the eyes, or give it a more sharp effect, which is associated with this really focused, this really sinister, or this really angry characteristic to the eye itself. Again, these are things we want to consider when we draw different eyes, that different shapes evoke different feelings in the eyes, and having this more narrowed, more sharpened effect is a great way to suggest like focus, or a crazy, or a seriousness within the character itself. Now we can proceed to drawing in the actual iris and pupil itself, and we're going to do the same thing as we did before. We want to draw in these circles that kind of extend beyond the upper eyelid. However, this time we can slightly cut off a little bit more of the iris itself, and this is because again the eyes are more narrow, so this obviously naturally means that less of the features in the eye are going to be visible. What we want to do is we want to use some sort of circular device, or at least a compass, to actually establish these circles in the eyes. And again, we just want to make sure that we're cutting off at least this time about 40% of the iris itself. So now we are going to draw in the pupils, but except this time we're not going to draw pupils in large, we're going to draw them as these really small circles. So another thing to consider is the pupil itself. Now obviously in real life our pupils dilate and contract in many situations that stimulate us in different ways. So for instance, when we are afraid, or if we're in flight mode, our pupils tend to contract because it's almost as if they are focused and prepared for the situation at hand. Whereas when we are in awe or relaxed, our pupils tend to dilate, and I think this particular quality again is more exaggerated in anime to just further convey emotions and responses to what's happening in the situation, or in the panel, or in the actual story that is contextualizing the character. Now in this case we're going to draw really small pupils, and what this is going to do is going to again give a very specific emotional quality to the character itself. It's going to suggest something more like focus or anger, or even a craziness in the eye. And this is a great way to give a more nuanced characteristic to the eye simply by changing the size of the pupil. Now again, we're going to follow the same process of working in some little negative spaces to establish a highlight. We're going to add in some shading that flows along the entire eye itself, just below the upper eyelid, to suggest a shadowing. The process is still the same, except the pupil itself this time is slightly smaller. The eye shape is slightly more narrow, just to change and evoke a different emotion through the eyes of the anime drawing. So we can follow the same process of adding shading that flows along the entire eyeball, along the upper section, completely over the iris and pupil itself. We just want to make sure we work in or establish these little negative spaces to create the highlight in the eye as well. Again, this is a really important quality to evoke a more naturalistic response to light reflecting off of the glassy surface of the eye. Now, once we have drawn in these features with our pencil, we're going to follow the same process once again with a darker medium, utilizing pen work or a marker or something dark to go over these details. And what we'll do is we want to spend time on one eye, and then obviously once we have completed one eye, we can transition to the other eye. Again, we can really darken these eyelashes. The eyelashes again are an exaggeration of the human features in the eyes. However, in this case, when we're dealing with anime eyes, we can be a little bit more exaggerating with our mark making to give more emphasis to characterization in the eye. With this particular narrowed eye drawing, anime style eye drawing, we can actually make the eyelashes really dark and kind of long to kind of establish that or emphasize that narrow quality. So we can really elongate the eyelashes near the outer corners of the eyes to give a bit more of a sinister, elongated, narrow, sharp kind of quality to the eye. We can also add in a small dark mark near the bottom corner section, outer corner section of the eye, to suggest a lower bottom eyelash on the lower eyelid. And again, we don't want to necessarily make this longer than the top eyelid eyelashes, but it is a way to just give more structure to the eye itself. We can also add shading that flows along the entire inside section of the parallelogram shape. And again, this is a way to define that shadow that's cast by the top eyelid and top eyelashes on the eye itself. And this flows through the iris and pupil as well. Again, we just want to make sure that the pupil is completely blacked out, but we do want to make sure that the highlight is completely negative to suggest that highlight in the eye. So as you shade around and in the eye itself, just make sure you leave that negative space to suggest a highlight. Again, another way to give a little bit more detail to the eyes, you can add these little line strokes that flow along the bottom area of the iris, and this is just a great way to add detail. And yeah, this is the general process of creating a more narrow, a more crazy look in the eye, something more sinister. You can proceed to apply the same process to the other eye once you have completed one eye with your pen work. And yeah, this is just another anime style eye that evokes a different type of emotion, something less neutral, something a bit more fight, more angry, more sinister,